Hello, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Nick Zulovich, Senior Editor at Cherokee Media Group. Thank you so very much for spending part of your busy day with us for our session titled Navigating Probability Amidst High Interest Rates, the Power of Accelerating Reconditioning, featuring a trio of experts from Rapid Recon and Velocity Automotive. Before we get started, though, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to it. That way you can review the great conversation Rapid Recon and Velocity Automotive are about to share and pass it along to your colleagues as well. Our experts will also take some time to answer your questions, so just use the chat function here on Zoom if you have any to pose to our experts online here with us today. So that's enough for me. Let's get right into our conversation titled Navigating Probability Amidst High Interest Rates, the Power of Accelerated Reconditioning, featuring Dennis McGinn and Daniel Anton of Rapid Recon and Josh DeYoung of Velocity Automotive. Gentlemen, take it away. It's all yours.
Well, Dennis, I think we want to start with you. If you want to maybe ask some questions that might implore some conversation, I think all of us on here want to hear from dealers and dealer body concerning this topic, because I think it's a topic right now that is of high priority. We look at what has happened with COVID. The used car market, the prices, high interest rates, which is something we're going to talk about today. So I'm gonna pass it on to you and see if you can get some implore some conversation maybe, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, as much as I like to avoid controversy, which is absolutely not true, I have lots of opinions about this marketplace and about how reconditioning applies to the current or evolving model of flexibility and what I call profit per vehicle, because we all know that fresh cars are the best sellers, assuming they're priced right and they're in your market, and that a car is like melting ice, right? After 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, it becomes almost unprofitable in this marketplace. And of course, the interest rates just contribute to the window that needs to be managed down to stay on top of that whole thing. So, I've been pretty much involved with this reconditioning industry problem really since 1990. And I would say it's made a lot of progress. I mean, people that didn't really want to be very accountable because they didn't really trust the system to be fair to everybody. I think it's made some pretty big strides forward in terms of being able to be fair and yet be able to use the results to make people accountable on more of a level basis. So I think that's the first stage in this whole industry segment, I think, is now that the products like Rapid Recon are becoming an industry standard, a KPI, if you will, a key performance indicator. And it's all now about speed and accuracy, so that the time it takes for you to make a decision on a car that you're going to acquire, whether it's wholesale or retail, and the accuracy. So being able to really gauge what you're going to have to put in this car if you decide to retail it. Those are the most critical items that I see right now. And it's a problem because new cars are starting to come into inventory, so their choices, people are starting to be able to move up, if you will, and there's a lot of energy around making a deal. And I think part of that making a deal is not giving enough attention to what it's really going to cost to make a trade to really know all the things you need to do to make the trade work for you on a retail basis. So I'll just kind of pass it around the room here a little bit and get everybody's comments on it. Dan, you spend a lot of time with groups and customers around the US on managing performance improvement and things. Could you kind of give us your insights into how this plays into what the groups are trying to do these days?
Absolutely. So what we've been seeing, especially with a number of the groups that our two companies are working with, is that there's a heavy emphasis on standardization when it comes to recon processes. Because at the end of the day, obviously, we want to have these cars standing up tall for us to actually be able to sell them for really all the money, right? And especially, we don't want to have any, say, incoming costs after the point of the deal, because at that point, you're just starting to erode someone's paycheck, and it just becomes a headache as well. So from a standardization standpoint, we're seeing dealers specifically, especially with using Rapid Recon and Velocity, where dealers are having very similar workflows from one dealer to another within a group. And we're also seeing a much heavier interaction of fixed ops directors, even CROs for major auto groups wanting to be involved in the standardization of these recon processes, because they understand what it actually contributes to the bottom line. One big example, and realistically, we haven't really put a true phrase on this until recently, but everyone understands the concept of holding cost, where it does cost us something, unfortunately, to keep this car on the ground. But for a lot of dealers, this number is kind of it's not an imaginary figure. We know it exists, but what are we really going to do? But what we want to look at now is it's the eroding of profit potential, right? So we all know, like, let's just say we have an acceptable amount of risk when it comes to getting the cars ready. Let's call it 5 days. And 5 days, typically within Rapid Recon, at least, is considered to be our kind of golden shining standard. If we can average 5 days from a start to finish, from a average days in recon standpoint, from the moment we have the vehicle clearly in sight to then that thing being frontline, then we're sitting clean. However, at 55 days and $55 a day per NCM, that's about $275 a car, which doesn't seem like a lot. That's one of those things where a lot of UCMs will kind of flagrantly put that away. They're like, look, I spend that doing 2 bumpers. What do I care? But if your recon's taking 10 days, then that's another 275. We're at 550 a car. But now you have to look at this big picture. Now we're doing 125 cars a month. That's $35,000, just under $35,000 of profit eroded. It's gone because it's taking you 10 days to do something instead of 5 days. And that's every month, right? So now we're at like almost $400,000 of money that's out of, at the end of the day, the dealer's paycheck, but also UCMs, everyone that's involved. So from start to finish, everyone is involved in really getting this profit standpoint measured.
Let me go to Josh for a minute. Josh is coming from the Velocity side of things, has seen a whole different set of customer opportunities, if you will. But Josh, from your experience, what is the difference with the customers you've worked with between what they think their average is of getting cars reconditioning and what it turns out really to be once you get your hands around it?
Well, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself, or the dealer has to ask themselves, is what is the definition of recon, right? I think sometimes we have a definition of just mechanical, right? Did we open the RO? Did we close the RO? What does that process look like? And I think we have to own it to ourselves that that's the first thing we have to ask. What is the definition? And the definition is from acquisition to front line. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if you don't have a piece of software like Rapid Recon, then you can't measure it. And if you look at every facet of a dealership's, business, they have a piece of software in every facet of it, right? You have a CRM on the front end. You have a write-up tool, and all those things are tracking KPIs that mean something. And there's incremental increases in those areas, but you don't have a software to track your reconditioning process where there's, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in. So, for me, it's a super anecdotal number. And at the end of the day, you can't measure what you can't see, and you can't fix what you can't measure. And if you don't own it to yourself and owe it to yourself to know what the definition is truly, and then understand that, the piece of software has got to be able to give you a number so you can have a starting point. And then once you have a starting point, you have a path to go down. And the path is very simple. And I'll say this, working with, a couple thousand stores, as does Rapid, I think we both can agree that it might not be as bad as it really is. And sometimes it is. And sometimes just knowing is the fix, right? When you don't know something is bad, you know the answer, but if you never figure out that it's bad, there's nothing that you can implore to fix it. Because dealers are smart. They know that detail might be a problem, but if you don't have a way to keep score, it's all a guess, right? Well, I had one car that took me 25 days. Does that mean all cars take 25 days in detail? Well, no, that one had dog hair in it, right? So being able to take a piece of software and be able to look at trends and identify those problem areas is probably the strongest thing out there.
Okay, great. I'll just make a comment, and then let's go back around here a little bit too, which is that I think for those dealers that are listening in here on this, I mean, no question that being a general manager of a dealership is probably one of the hardest jobs there is, because you're trying to navigate through at least 5 different P&Ls to try and make your month-to-month kind of work through. And yet the people in this industry tend to be less innovative and less ready to move ahead. I guess that you call that change resistant, and it's been there for a long, long time. So the ability to jump in and adapt things is really challenging for people who get used to doing things one way, or maybe that's the way they were shown by the people that brought them into the dealership or whatnot. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges I've seen in this industry too, is just the idea that in order to go to a system like Rapid or Velocity, I'm going to have to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to expose what I'm really doing. And I don't really want to do that unless everybody else is going to do it the same way. So Dan, you know this territory. How do you explain that to a dealer where you've got some of the people that are dragging their feet saying, I don't know if I really like or trust this whole thing, but yet we know what it is that should be done here to make everything work better. So give me your 2 cents about this.
Yeah, so especially when it comes to when we're coaching general managers, used car directors, the like, one of these, at the end of the day, we were really wanting to emphasize that, we don't need them in Rapid Recon micromanaging all their people. Their people know what their jobs are, right? We want to make sure, and it's really just a matter of making sure everyone inside the system it just understands their part in the kind of overall circle of the process. And when we're especially, one kind of a quick idea on that is that when I'm specifically talking to general managers, I'm going to let them know, look, when you're looking in the system, ask questions, put in a note on a vehicle, just simply asking, hey, what's the update on this one if it's delayed? What we're wanting to do is, it's one of these, kind of like an agile method where we're wanting to, kind of be subtle coaches, right? And just keep them in the board. But at the end of the day, by having everyone play their role, including GMs kind of being farther back, but, just kind of everyone knowing that they're kind of ever present still, is going to allow basically the whole system to, kind of bring everything back around and just be more fluid.
Thank you. Josh, back to you on this thing. Can you cite some examples of worst case, best case that you've been involved in? I mean, where you've been brought in because, hey, it's just not working. What are we going to do to fix it? And maybe an example of who got it. In other words, who figured it out and how it helped them. So over to you.
Yeah. So I think if once you have a baseline of data, right? They understand the definition. They understand that there's a challenge. They understand that we're not going to manage it. I think that there's a lot of surprises out there. I think sometimes we think mechanical is the major problem, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing that. Right? These guys are on flat rate mostly. They know that the used car department is their number one customer. From a technician parts advisor standpoint, that's usually not where the challenge is. I see some challenges with photos and detail. So, for example, for dealers that don't have photo people on site, that they're not an employee of the dealership and they're subletting that out. If you look at it very objectively and logically, it will surprise you. Again, having Rapid Recon is going to give you that data that you can see it, and it's not a guess. And I'll give you an example. I had a dealer in Dallas, Texas, that said, "Man, I think my pictures are taking too long. We're going to install your system, but what do you think is going to happen?" And I said, "Well, let's start to look at the data and let's identify where you think there's an opportunity." And the reality is, his picture person only came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So think about that. Is your car ready to be sold and frontline ready and standing tall on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, when the car gets handed over to the picture department after the picture person leaves? Well, now you've added 4 days in photos because it's sitting there waiting to be photoed and he's not there. So he couldn't identify that with real data until he put in a system. So able to do that, he said, all right, we're going to have 2 picture companies and somebody's going to be here every single day. So when you have data like that and you can make data-driven decisions and not have anecdotal conversations and understand it's pretty logical, and detail could be the same thing where these guys are only showing up, once or twice a day. Those cars are not really retail ready because they're not being done because you don't have the manpower and you're not looking at it objectively. So there's a lot of ways like that you'll be able to identify and be able to fix it and identify with the software.
Great. Dan, can you same question to you. Where have you seen it really work, take hold, and people get it and it's making their job. This has to make their jobs easier.
Yeah.
In order for them to not feel vulnerable about this being fair to them and everybody else, how does that come across? How do you work with that?
So actually kind of piggybacking off Josh's statement there, I mean, he's absolutely right with what I'm seeing as well, where, the photo companies and kind of it's not necessarily the inside the service bay, it's the externals, our vendors, whoever's doing paint touch up, denting removal, all that, that's where we're actually starting to see, people kind of being brought into the fold more. And they understand their role as well. And it's one of these things where before, especially those dealerships that Josh mentioned, where, we have a photographer come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then you realize what that's actually costing you. That's when, all right, look, we're going to make a change. Either you talk to the photo company, look, I need someone here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every day if I can. Because at the end of the day, who is all of this serving? And when we're looking at trying to get these cars ready, we're doing all of this so that we can ultimately provide a product for our customer, right? And especially in today's world, when you have consumers that are, they're kind of itchy especially when it comes to these interest rates nowadays. I just from personal experience, I got lucky. I bought a car like 2 weeks ago, and then I found out the feds raised the interest rates again 2 days after I purchased that. Right. So it's one of these cases where, there are people out there that especially they just want to see a car that's ready. And, they want to see a car that's ready now so they can purchase it now versus whatever might happen in next week. Right. That's what's scaring a lot of these, a lot of consumers as well, which that is what we're doing. We're manufacturing products so that we can provide them to consumers externally. And so that's, there's always the consumer part in play as well.
Josh, I'm going to drill into the question a little bit at a group level. Okay, so every franchise, every store is today part of a group. Could be 2 stores, or it could be, I guess the biggest one is, Lithia now being what they're at about 400, something like that. But what I know I've heard you interact a lot with the people being put in a group responsibility to try and drive better results, better behavior. Kind of, how do you approach that? I mean, if I'm a group fixed ops director, or group variable guy, and I'm saying, how can you guys help me? What do you say to them?
Well, I mean, you got to have the data, right? So being able to first, get them on Rapid Recon and look at that enterprise report and be able to be super granular. Coming from fixed ops myself, in retail, in the DMS itself, I looked at an exception report, right? Which is really what Rapid is. And that's really what we want to kind of focus on. We understand that, you're going to get some cars in and out fairly quickly, low mileage. You bought them from a rental car company and you turned them quick. They didn't need anything. But you're going to have the cars that, there's a part on back order. You're going to have a body shop bill that's big and you're waiting on parts. So we understand that. So being able to lay all that data on top of one another and say, hey, listen, this is your trends, right? I can break it out by brand. I can break it out by region. I can break it out by, here's your strengths in fixed operations. Here's your strengths in variable. You have an approval time process issue at this store. When you can see that at a 50,000 foot view, I'm a big believer with dealers that you can't fix the problem, 30 days after it's passed. Why don't you fix the problem as it's happening? And when you have data like this, let's go fix the issue. And again, I want to be super transparent and clear here. Most of them have the answer. I'm not fixing it. We're not fixing it. I'm just giving you the data to fix it, right? You know the right answers. You know what to do. You just don't have the data to fix it. And when you don't have the data, it's hard to make decisions. Especially on a corporate level. But trends is a big thing. And when you can group it by region, and you can group it by, different days in step based on an approval process or things like that, and you can see it at a high level, you can start to identify things fairly quickly and not wait for 30 days, because then it's too late, right? You're now trying to undo a behavior that you knew 25 days ago. It's super powerful when you can do something like that, especially when it's never existed before. And I think once you have something like this, especially on a group level, it's powerful, and it's powerful in a big way.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about planning your business. If I'm a GM or a group fixed or variable person, I'm trying to help my stores to be able to have more consistent performance in terms of what they're doing. So it's all about process and process improvement. And I'm sitting there looking at my 5 different P&Ls and saying, okay, what can I count on in my business? Well, we know parts and service are right in there. I mean, they're pretty predictable. We know if we have new cars and there's demand, we're going to sell those, but the profitability seems like it's shifted over to used cars because they're all unique. You can't take the same trim and shop it with the 5 brand folks that are in your zone or whatever. So that seems to me that the critical lever gets right back to your profit variability has to do with your predictability of your reconditioning process for your used cars. Dan, can maybe you comment on that, and then Josh too? I guess I'm trying to drag around the fact that if I'm a GM, I want to be able to predict my business outcome. And the one that I think is the most difficult but doable is the reconditioning part of your business. So Dan, any comments? And then Josh?
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's surprising how, especially when us on the performance team are coaching dealerships, how often we see where dealers are concerned that their time's going up, but at the same time, they knowingly purchase 50% more inventory than they normally would. You know, it's one of those things where, look, there's always going to be a cost, there's always going to be an effect to a cost, right? So if we go ahead and we expand our inventory so that we can sell more cars, you know, we need to make sure we're allocating the resources necessary to make sure something gets done. Or at the very least, you know, if we're only able to say shoehorn, you know, 100 cars through detail at a time, like within a month, and we all of a sudden are planning on having a 150 car month, then yeah, we need to make sure that we're planning ahead. We need to make sure that if our detail is sublet, then we're having communications and we're telling this company, look, I'm going to have more inventory. I need more bodies. I need more detailers to get this done. You know, it's one of these, it's really just effective planning is really what it is. And it's surprising that when we're doing this coaching, there's still kind of an element of surprise of that when we are able to show, you know, that data. You know, Josh brought it up earlier with some of Rapid Recon's reporting is, you know, we're able to show every dealers that's on our platform, we're able to show their trends. So if it's a matter of, hey, we know what detail on average is taking us, we know what the intake process is taking us. You know, if we decide we will all of a sudden want to boost the inventory level, then of course we need to make sure we're allocating resources effectively to make sure that we can compensate for that.
Josh, you know, could you weigh in on that and then maybe add your thoughts about the communication elements that are important here across the reconditioning process?
Yeah, so I think, you know, looking at planning ahead is important. And, you know, we start to look at, like you said, you know, we made a big push, all of us during COVID, to say, hey, listen, times are pretty good in the car business. You know, people are making a lot of money. You have salespeople that are sitting in your showroom right now that don't remember the good old days, right? They only remember the 20 car months where people were paying over MSRP. And, you know, my big push and our big push was to, you know, listen, now's the time to really tighten it down and stay focused and implement the processes. And you don't want to paint your house when it's raining, right? You want to paint your house when it's sunny, and it's sunny right now. So I think a lot of dealers took on to that and some didn't, right? And, you know, we start to look at some data that I think is super important, and we're getting really granular on this. But if you look at what a dealer says estimated recon is for a vehicle versus what they're actually spending, right? And being able to come to an appraiser, let's say Dan's appraising a car and saying, hey, Dan, you know, listen, this is what you said that it was going to cost for us to recon this vehicle, and here's what it actually was, right? And then be able to look at that trend and hold that person accountable, again, with data, have data-driven decisions. You know, now you're not cost to sell adjusting vehicles. And when you start to look at profit, that's a dirty word that a lot of people don't think they can control, and it's controlled, and you can look at that data. And that's something that we're, you know, as a company, we're really looking at is what are we estimating versus what our actual is. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful information that not many people can close the gap on and close the loop on. So I think that's super powerful from a GM perspective to really try to maintain cost to sell adjustments at the end of the day.
I've along this line, you know, I get to see pretty much everybody's data and what's going on, but I've seen a pretty what I would say concerning change in the actual reconditioning that needs to be put in vehicles. And I don't know whether it's post-COVID or it's the fact that it's harder to get good inventory that's clean. So I'm seeing that number ratchet up pretty quickly in terms of what reconditioning is needed to make the car retail ready, safe and retail ready. It, you know, used to be $500 or $1,000 a few years back. I'm seeing bigger numbers like 3,000 and 4,000 average. What what do you think, Dan? Yeah, anything like that going on out there?
So yes, I mean, from a dealership perspective, we've absolutely been seeing, I would honestly, it's probably brought up in every third review we're having with our clients, where they're essentially having to trade in and they're holding cars that they would normally wholesale out, right? If someone trades in a car that is beat up, it's lived a long life, but there's at the same time, consumers are out there to get more and more cars. And so at the end of the day, it's a matter of, okay, does the dealership understand that there is some more there, even if there's some profit potential in the vehicle, they're going to keep it now versus sending it off to wholesale and really just kind of flipping the coin. Because also at the same time, the wholesale side has been really unpredictable lately. And so if instead they can say, look, we're going to go ahead and keep this car. We'd normally wholesale this car, but we're going to keep it this time. We are going to keep that, we're going to have to eat more of the recon costs, have a $3,000, $4,000 recon estimate on a mainstream vehicle, not something that's, not somewhere where you're having to rebuild something. And at the end of the day, have to, and have a presentable vehicle to a consumer so that they can still buy. And hopefully, even if you're not having to, unfortunately not make much on the front end, then, it's at the end of the day, you'll still catch some of the finance. Right. So, yeah, we are hearing from a number of dealerships. It's a pretty common thread is that they're holding on to inventory that they would otherwise wholesale.
Josh, I have a little different question coming at you, which is that we've seen the Fed increase the interest rates now. I don't know how many times, you probably know that, but it's gone from pre-COVID to dramatically higher. But yet it seems like the demand for the customer demand for both new and used cars is still gaining ground. How do you read that? What's your thought?
Yeah, I think that, the people that bought cars, when there were no cars, I don't think they had a choice, right? Like maybe the car was, very depleted and it was time to buy, or it was a lease turn in or things like that. I think most of the audience out there said, hey, listen, I'm just going to hold on. And now it almost seems like, well, I don't want to hold on. I want to get it now because who knows how high it could be, right? And I think they're seeing that trend of, well, it just keeps going up incrementally. And if I don't get it now, it's going to be high now, but I can't wait 2 years. What is that going to look like? What is 6 months going to look like? So I think the demand is still super high, especially for people that are like, listen, I'm on the fence about getting a car. I looked at the average payment just in South Carolina, for example. The average payment in South Carolina for a vehicle right now is over $1,000. And you look at that and go, how are people paying for that? How are people buying cars? Well, some people are getting super tight. But I don't think they want to wait because who knows what could happen, right? How much higher could we raise the interest rates? So I think it's almost, hate to say it, a scare tactic and saying, hey, listen, you better buy now because who knows what it's going to be.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. And so it's whether you're on the owner GM group side of the business, or you're one of the people in the reconditioning pipeline, whether you're a vendor or whether you're an employee. I mean, the making that work in a predictable way seems to be the linchpin here as the industry goes through more change here. Electric vehicles coming in, people are trying to figure out, do they really want to invest for the infrastructure that the OEMs are wanting you to put in order to qualify so you can sell their electric vehicles. But it seems like we're headed right into a pretty massive change in the makeup of the retail industry. I'm in California, so I get to see it a little bit earlier, I think, because You know, I'm in Northern California. It's kind of like Tesla town around here. So we've all seen kind of what the OEMs are trying to compete with here. And I would just my own opinion of this is I just think the GMs have to have a way to predict their business better than they have. And again, parts and service is pretty easy, right? You got a way to control that. You kind of know what you're to inspect. But on the reconditioning side, because of all these factors that are going on, that the inventory coming in takes more reconditioning work to make it retail ready. Yet I've got to be really efficient in getting these things through the process, because they're going to be worth less every day, because the competition's there too. So it seems like, you know, without something like Rapid Recon or a workflow tool that makes it somewhat predictable, I don't know how you could sleep at night. So with that, say, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? Am I still going to be in business? So that's just kind of my view of this whole thing. And I spent a lot of time trying to keep up with the industry. It's hard on a daily basis. Almost there are changes going on. So let me just kind of go around one more time with you, Josh, and with Dan, and kind of maybe we could bring all this together with the biggest problems facing the industry, and then your idea of what's happening next year, and how do you make your life a little more predictable for your profitability and for the people working for you?
Yeah, you know, I think as a GM or an owner, you have a full plate, right? And you know, as an operator of a store or owner of a store, I think you try to put out the hottest fire in front of you. And I think a lot of times, you know, most dealers in their minds don't think it's a hot fire, right? It's technician shortage, or it's, you know, I need more of this, I need more of that. And I just don't think reconditioning in their mind is something that's a hot button. But you know, I've always said you can't lose what you never had. And I don't think they ever had it. And it's there and they're losing it. It's just not being exploited. And, you know, I think if you look yourself in the mirror and go, you know, I don't need this tool, I've got 100 cars, I can control it. I think those are the dealers, at least in the next 18 months, in my opinion, are going to go, you know what, maybe I need to look at something like this. And, you know, understand that it might not be as good as I want it to be, but it might be better than I think. I think, you know, predictability is huge. And I think as we all start to get more data around, you know, cost, it's going to start to leverage a lot more opportunities in this space. But I think next year, you know, business will be as usual, if you want to call it that. There's not a lot of usual left. I think the consumer confidence is increasing. I also believe that consumers are very smart, and they're a lot smarter than they used to be. And some of that is because of COVID, because you couldn't step into a showroom. And I think when you have to tell your inventory story, maybe in a different way, I think those are the customers that are going to buy from those dealers. But at the end of the day, if you can't get them reconditioned and you can't identify challenges that you have, it's going to be a hard uphill battle.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Dan, any final thoughts here, and then we'll wrap it up?
Actually, so Josh did something about being, you know, really having to react to the biggest fire that's in front of you. And that's really one of the biggest points here. And unfortunately, what it is for dealers is that they are being reactionary. They're not really being proactive with a lot of this. I spent some time with an auto group last week that they were training a couple of new used car managers, and they had to train these guys on 19 different software solutions that they need to know to do their job effectively. Like 19 different things, 19 different systems, different logins, different all these things. And they're all meant to, you know, help you in minute little ways on the variable side and on the fixed side, just so they can get their whole picture. So why not have, be able to understand and be proactive with a system that's able to properly track everything that's actually going on with your inventory in front of you. If you're not able to actually understand what's going on in front of you, then how are you going to be able to plan for the future? Right. So that's really what, we want to kind of shift everything from being really reactionary to being proactive, understanding your inventory, understanding your processes, making adjustments so that you aren't, those dealerships like Josh mentioned that in 12, 18 months are going to end up, frankly, being caught with their pants down and saying, oh no, now what? While their neighbor down the road is sitting there because they had their processes tight, because they figured out what they needed to do, they're able to grow things up and get it to the point where they're able to have a 200 car inventory now and aren't suffering in terms of timing or reconditioning processes at all.
That's really helpful, Dan. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Nick, and I want to thank Cherokee and Nick for helping us to put this together. I hope it's been useful. So back to you, Nick.
Absolutely, gentlemen. Intriguing conversation and wonderful points from each one of you. Very useful information for a dealership of any size. And gentlemen, just one last question, perhaps give each of you a chance to recap some final thoughts as you've already shared. Josh, we'll start with you, and then Daniel, and then Dennis will have the final word. As you referenced throughout your conversations, just what would you say are maybe some strategies that you've seen other stores use to convince, whether it's the dealer principal, a general manager, a shop manager, whomever, to implement some changes in the reconditioning process? Which trends or metrics need to be watched to improve the process? Just some closing recommendations of how to clear the challenges that might be in place to sharpen those reconditioning situations. Josh, let's go back to you, and then Daniel and Dennis will have the final word to wrap us up.
Yeah, listen, I know, any dealer or GM or operator that's listening to this, your biggest concern is, are my people going to use it, right? And buy-in is important. So, I implore you, if you think you need it, let's just have a conversation, right? And I'll tell you if it's time. I'll tell you, hey, listen, I don't know that this is a good fit for you, but when you're ready, because the worst thing that we want as a company is to completely disrupt your business, because we know what your job is, right? You want to sell cars, you want to turn hours in the shop, and there's a lot of things that we can help with, but we don't want to disrupt your business. Everybody on this call has have been in the business, and so we understand what you guys are going through, and we just want to help. So if there's a conversation to be had, let's have a conversation, and then we can really dig into things that matter, that are going to make a difference.
Very good. Thank you, Josh. Daniel, to you.
Yeah. So from kind of the words of wisdom from another number of dealers that we've been working with is, you can't fix what you don't know, right? And so you have to have some sort of a system in place to be able to at least measure what's going on right in front of you. And frankly, when it comes to, in terms of like the leaky faucet, most of the time, it's one of those cases where dealers are surprised when they find out that area is actually photos. And, dealers are going to go ahead and, I know this is normally Dennis's job, but I'm gonna be a little controversial here in a minute, is where the idea of not having in-house photos always baffled me. Whenever I started a new dealership, it's the very first change I made, because it's super easy to bring photos in-house. You hire a porter, you go, for any of our dealers listening that are, located in a major city, go to a cars and coffee show, look for someone that's taking photos, offer them a job, because that's the type of person that they're going to take pride in what they're doing. They're going to go ahead and they're going to want to take photos. They're going to give you quality product. And then if you have your photos caught up and you don't have anything right then and there that needs to be photographed, then now you can have them backed up as a porter who's also going to help keep the lot tidy, make sure inventory is flowing the way it needs to. It's like the perfect person to be able to use to really make sure your organization's on, heading in the right direction. So, it's one of these things where, I'm shocked that we don't see more in-house photos, but especially from a rapid recon standpoint, it's one of those cases where those type of people typically also make sure that their photos and their vehicles are being moved effectively and efficiently.
Excellent recommendations and great anecdotes, Daniel. Thank you. Well, to wrap us up, the sage of our panel, Mr. Dennis McGinn, your closing thoughts.
I have a lot of them, but I'm going to keep it, kind of focused down to what I think is the most important, which is profit per vehicle, front end, but back end's important. But in terms of controllability and predictability, if you don't have a workflow tool that is dialed in, that you have all the people that are doing work for you from beginning to end, saying, I'm done with my part, I'm done with my part. You have no accountability, okay? And you're not being fair to yourself, your business, or your people, because you're letting them, get by with whatever they were doing before. And I can tell you with thousands of dealers we've worked with and experienced, some will just continue to fall back on, it's too hard and I can't get my people to use it, or I can't get my service manager or fixed ops director, they get pushback. And, techs and people like that can be really strong people. But this is really a must. I mean, having the measure, manage, controllability, predictability underneath at your hands makes everything work better all the way up and down the line in terms of profitability, in terms of getting a better price for the customer, in terms of the lives and the work that your technicians, your vendors, all those people need to do to get the car through the cycle. I started something a long time ago. I did a calculation that on an average, every 2.5 days you take out of your reconditioning process translates to another inventory turn on an average. And you can kind of play your own numbers with that, but it's still the same. It's still, nothing's really changed. It's a lot of money. There's a lot of money involved with that. And your best bet as a GM of an operation or as a group leader is having your used car process under control and predictable, so that you are getting your cars through to the right price, the right speed, the right time, and the merchandising. So that's my final comment is, if you don't have your hands on that particular part of your business, just as well as you do with your parts predictability, your service predictability, your used car operation is probably now more important than any of those, because you already have an idea of how to predict that part of your business. So that's my final thing. I've seen a lot of success in this industry. I've seen a lot of failures where it was too difficult to get everybody behind the idea of making a change or pushing a button and that kind of thing. But the ones that have been successful, the thousands that we've worked with, they're much happier in terms of their ability to manage their business. There's a lot fewer ulcers, a lot less brain damage when you can predict and and you got your hands around it, and everybody sees the same thing. Everybody sees this is where we are. We are at 5 days time to line, and we know it's true because we can see everybody's doing their part. So with that, I'm gonna say thank you to Nick and to the Cherokee Media Group, who I always had a good relationship with and a great respect for, and that really appreciate your support.
Thank you so much. Again, that's Dennis McGinn and Daniel Anton of Rapid Recon and Josh DeYoung of Velocity Automotive. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the very intriguing conversation about, as you all said, a critically important topic, especially with where we stand in today's car business. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
And on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you so very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.
Thank you.